So, just how old is everyone in these X-Men movies? The X-Men movies from 20th Century Fox continue despite all odds. Better than before, wearing out their welcome? I'll let you guys decide. This video isn't really about that. The big issue that's getting brought up a lot, especially with XMen Apocalypse, is how old these characters are now. Ever since the soft reboot that was X-Men First Class put the team in the 1960s, each new group film has jumped ahead 10 years or so, allowing us to see our heroes and villains against different historical backdrops. In a weird way, it accidentally makes it a little more true to the comics, as the X-Men adventures were published through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and so on, with the stories being influenced by current events as you'd expect. However, it does pose a problem that the filmmakers seem content to glance over. The characters should all be getting older, but they're not. The gang we met in X-Men First Class, the ones who are still alive, should all be at least 20 years older than when they started, but they seem largely unchanged, most of them. Also, the next movie that they're working on is now rumored to be set in the 1990s, continuing the trend. Hoo boy. So in this video, I will attempt to work out definitively how old the characters are in these movies, mainly X-Men Apocalypse. This video will contain spoilers for all the movies, so be warned. Now, I'm mainly focusing on the characters who appeared in that movie. That's still most of the major players. I'm also not going to look much at characters who only appeared in one movie, such as Gambit, Banshee, Darwin, Bishop, Warpath, or Blink. The same goes for characters who appeared twice, but were clearly meant to be different people, such as Jubilee, Psylocke, Angel, Toad, Blob, Boulevard Trask, Sebastian Shaw, Emma Frost, Caliban, and probably Sabretooth. So we're not going to look at them at all. I should also note that I'm counting the prologue of X-Men The Last Stand, where a de-aged Xavier Magneto meets the teenage Jean Grey, as non-canon, as pretty much all the rest of the movies ignore it. Same goes for X-Men Origins Wolverine, but we'll get to that later. The ages of the actors in any given time is also largely irrelevant, but if you're wondering, James McAvoy was 32 when First Class came out, while Michael Fassbender was 34. Patrick Stewart was 60 when he started playing Charles in 2000, and Ian McKellen was 61. You can look up the rest on your own. So let's build our timeline. The 6 main X-Men films split cleanly into 2 sets. The first set in what we're told is the not-too-distant future, and the second all set in the past. Now, of course, Days of Future Past, they managed to actually change the past, effectively wiping out the events of the original 3, but that's not really my concern, as everyone should still be, the same age as they were before in any event. So let's break it down. Now, the prequel films, if we can call them that, are easy. First Class, using the Cuban Missile Crisis as a backdrop, takes place mainly in 1962. The past part of Days of Future Past, where the guys are trying to stop Mystique from killing Tyrion Lannister, is explicitly in 1973. And X-Men Apocalypse has plenty of cues, such as The Return of the Jedi, playing in the theaters, which puts it in 1983, the year I was born. Hey! The original 3 are trickier. The not-too-distant future could mean a lot of times. The first one came out in 2000. I was tempted to use the future part of Days of Future Past, which is 50 years after 1973, putting it in 2023, and count backwards with the actors aging in real time and put the first one in 2009. But I don't think that's quite right. I think they would need a little more time for the War with the Sentinels to take place. So I'm putting the events of X-Men 1 in 2007, 7 years after it was made, with the second film occurring later the same year. That sounds pretty not too distant to me. I was originally going to do 2005, but 2007 gives us a nearby election year, and there's a new president and new status quo in X-Men The Last Stand, so that'll be 2009. We'll look at the Wolverine solo movies in detail in a bit, but for now we'll push those aside. So that's our timeline. 6 films and 7 time periods. So how old is everyone? The prologue of the first film, which is replayed in First Class, checks in with Eric in Poland in 1944, arriving in Auschwitz with his family. We then cut over to young Charles meeting young Mystique, which is supposed to be happening at the same time. We'll say Eric is 12, which makes him 30 in 1962. Now, as for Charles, this is a little tricky. He doesn't act like he's in his 30s, since he's still got the stink of youth on him. In Logan, we're told he's 90, and that movie's set in 2029, so he was born probably in 1939, making him 5 or 6 in the opening. A little young for that shot, probably. And 23 in 1962, a fair bit younger than his lifelong frenemy. He may even be older than 90 in Logan, but we'll stick with these numbers. What about Mystique? Well, the good news for her is her lack of aging is actually addressed, with young Beast explaining that her shape-shifting powers will slow down her aging, so that's why she gets to stick around the old guys in the original films despite being the same age as them. So there you go. Now, with Mystique, we have a problem. We're told in 1962 that she's below the legal drinking age, making her no older than 20. But that would mean that when she met Xavier in the prologue, he was 6 and she was 2. She doesn't look 2 there, does she? So I say she's just pretending. Anyway, I went ahead and put her age in between Charles and Eric. So we'll say she's 10 in the prologue and 28 in the rest of the movie. Who else we got? The young version of Beast is introduced. Science prodigy who's still young but old enough to be doing science stuff for the government. We'll put him at 22. Moira McTaggart shows up in the past, old enough to be a CIA agent while still being Xavier's main squeeze. I put her age at 24. And yes, Moira also appears in The Last Stand, but I'm ignoring that. And finally, Havoc, the only other one from the First Class to not die between films, gets to show up briefly in all 3 of these movies. We'll go ahead and make him 16. So there's our gang for the first movie. Now on to Days of Future Past. Now in the past part, 11 years have gone by, the school is shut down, the Vietnam War is in progress. Professor X is now 34 and pretty much a junkie. Beast is looking after him at the mansion, he's 33. Magneto is 41 and locked up in the Pentagon. Mystique is now 39, is a renegade out doing stuff, during which she blows past Havoc, who's in the army and is now 27. Here we also meet Quicksilver, who in the movie acts like we've met him in the future part, but obviously we haven't. We'll say he's 17. The gang also encounters young William Stryker, who will be important later. Not yet a colonel, I put him down at age 29 here. So far so good, huh? On to X-Men Apocalypse, and now the same actors playing the same characters 21 years later is getting a little hard to swallow. So, where's everyone now? Charles, now 44 years old, has got his beloved school in full swing. Beast is there with him as a teacher, now 43. Magneto, age 51, is off with his new family for a while. Mystique is using her renegade tendencies for good now, clocking in at 49, but able to shapeshift herself to whatever age she likes. Quicksilver returns, of course, still living in his mom's basement at age 26. William Stryker reappears to cause some trouble, now presumably 39 years old. Moira comes back, presumably 45, and there's one more, but we'll get to him in a sec. Now, part of the draw of this movie is that enough time has passed that they can finally start bringing in the characters who appeared in the first 2 movies. They were all grown up back then, but they're all still teenagers in this movie. Cyclops is the big one, of course. We were all wondering if he would still be Havoc's brother, like in the comics, despite the hilarious age difference, and it turns out that, yes, he is. I went ahead and made Scott 18 here, still in high school and still 19 years younger than his brother, who can't be younger than 37 by now, which means he most definitely wasn't even born yet in First Class, no matter how you slice it. For those wondering, Alex was the younger brother in the comics. These movies are weird. We also meet the young version of Jean Grey, Storm, and Nightcrawler, who I've decided are 17, 16, and 15 respectively. Why not make them all the same age? Because it's my show, that's why. So, there's our cast for X-Men Apocalypse. And so let us continue, powering on backwards and forwards in time simultaneously, as we head into the original films and their original casts in the not-too-distant future, continuing from the dates we set already. X-Men 1 and 2 are 2007. Charles is 68, Magneto is 75, Mystique is 73, Cyclops is 42, Jean is 41, Storm is 40, Nightcrawler is 39, and William Stryker is 63. Beast, off on assignment or whatever, is 67. I'm presuming that the kids, Iceman, Rogue, Kitty, and Colossus, are all between 15 and 18. Add 2 years to each of those for X-Men The Last Stand, and there you go. There's the original trilogy. And now for the future half of Days of Future Past, we're looking at a grim dystopian version of 2023, fixed to a more optimistic version at the end thanks to a little time travel trickery. In this future, Professor X is 84 years old, Magneto is 91, Storm is 56. For the gang resurrected in the fixed timeline, Beast is 83, Jean is 57, Cyclops is 58, Iceman, Rogue, Kitty, and Colossus, all very much alive at the end, would all be in their 30s. So now let's talk about the big money guy. Wolverine's official birth date in 616 comics canon is in the early 1880s. X-Men Origins, however, puts his flashback in 1845 with him already around, 10 years old, making him a whole 50 years older than he was in the comics, presumably so he can fight in the American Civil War, would be my guess. However, almost none of that movie is counted as canon in the rest of the series, since it was so embarrassing, I guess. And Wolverine's immortal, so it doesn't really matter anyway. As Jean said way back in the first movie, his healing factor makes his age impossible to determine. But, whatever, let's run with this anyway. If we count 1835 as his official birth year in the films, because it doesn't matter, then he was 127 when he first met Charles and Eric in First Class. He was 138 when he met them again in Days of Future Past. There's some confusion about when the climax of X-Men Origins takes place, but I always figured it was in 1979, which is when the 3 Mile Island incident happened, which serves as the climax. So there he's 144. He was 148 when the gang busted him out of Alkali Lake in Apocalypse. He was 172 when he joined the team originally. And going by his beard, I prefer to think that his second solo movie occurs about 2 years after the events of The Last Stand, and not the 7 years later it was actually made, making him 176 there. So that's a whole 12 years for the war with the Sentinels to occur, before he reaches the age of 188, finally old enough to get some gray in his hair, where he travels back into the body of his younger self. Finally, in the grim alternate future of Logan, he taps out at 194. So, there you go. That's how old everyone is in these movies, give or take a few years. If the next X-Men movie continues the trend and happens in 1993, which apparently it will, only 14 years before the original movie, then Xavier will be 54, Magneto will be 61, Beast will be 53, Mystique will be 59, Moira will be 55, Quicksilver will be 37, Cyclops will be 28, Jean 27, Storm 26, Nightcrawler 25, and Wolverine, if he appears at all, will be a spry 158. Did I miss anything? Let me know in the comments below. I probably did. These movies are weird. Like, favorite, subscribe, check out our website at evilcloneproductions.com, and I'll see you guys around.